Guys, I don't think I really need to say it, but I'm going to say it anyways. I will now be thankful every single day that my first kiss was not as traumatic or horrifying as what I just witnessed Denji going through in this week's episode. Hello everybody, I am Phenom Sage, and welcome back to another Chainsaw Man episode review. Today we are going to be talking about episode 7, The Taste of a Kiss, man. And contrary to pretty much every single episode in the series so far, I don't actually have a lot to talk about this week, which is surprising because this episode is almost entirely character-driven as far as we're finally seeing how all of our characters interact with each other in more normal circumstances. We are learning some interesting details about some of them. We're just acclimating ourselves to their personalities and their presence, and to that extent, I had a good time watching this episode, but it also didn't really give me as much to really dive into and analyze as I would have expected from an entirely character-driven episode of Chainsaw Man. That being said, there are still some very interesting things to discuss, and probably the one that everyone is going to walk away from this episode thinking about is whether Denji is actually going to do it. Is he going to have sex with Himeno? Because, well, for one, I actually really liked that final scene, even though I'm pretty sure Himeno is in her 20s, so maybe a little bit of a sus vibe there. Don't let Twitter find out about this episode, but I did really like that scene because it almost came across to me like Himeno regrets the dumb puke kiss that she did to Denji, and she's trying to make it up to him in her own way. And clearly over the episode, you can get the vibe that she's very promiscuous and very free-flowing, I guess we'll call it, where this kind of behavior didn't really surprise me, but I like that underneath all of that playful behavior, you can tell that she has grown to care about Denji to some extent, and she feels bad for what she did. Because yeah, we can all laugh at Denji's first kiss being ruined by puke flowing into his mouth, but it's very sobering in that very next scene when you see Denji just in tears because this first experience that he's wanted for his entire life was practically ruined. It's a goddamn joke now. And one thing that we have established over the series is that Denji does value those first experiences and these things that he's wanted all this time at a level that basically constitutes his entire motivation and his entire dream. And it's because of that dream and because of him holding these first experiences in such high regard that I want to say that he will actually reject Himeno's offer at the end of the episode. Now, I could be totally wrong about that because Denji is also the kind of person that is just desperate for any opportunity he gets to achieve these things that he wants, but after that puke kiss, maybe he just doesn't trust Himeno, or what I think is more likely the case, what is more likely going on in his head, I think Denji just values Makima and puts her on such a high pedestal that because he's gotten this opportunity to kill the gun devil and receive anything that he wants from her, I think in his mind he'll persevere and try to save that first experience for Makima after the mission is complete. Now again, I could be totally wrong about this. He could wrestle with it in his mind, but ultimately just say, fuck it, it's still sex. It's still the dream that I've had this entire time. Nothing would really surprise me, but I would be pretty impressed thematically and in terms of Denji's growth as a character if he does end up rejecting Himeno in the next episode. I also really liked how the ED this episode was kind of an extension of that dilemma that Denji is facing. He's surrounded by girls, he's surrounded by temptations, and it's up to him to focus and zone in on what he ultimately wants and what he ultimately values. This is not a harem series, Denji. You have to pick your priorities now. But in terms of those priorities, this show really seems to be doubling down on Himeno right now, man. Like, it feels like the past 3 episodes have all had some very big focus on her character and her motivations right now. And most of it this episode wasn't really anything new. We've already talked about a lot of these aspects about her character in the past few episodes. But one thing that I found interesting about her this episode is this grudge or just disdain that she seems to have for Makima. We hear her just really lace into her at the end of the episode, and you kind of always got this feeling that she was either jealous or just unhappy that Makima was seducing these people around her that she cares about, both Aki and now Denji as well. And speaking of Makima, I also found it interesting how in the welcoming party that they end up having, you have a lot of mixed reactions to her presence, but one thing that you can generally just feel from a lot of them is this uneasiness. And one of the workers there even says that they had never even seen Makima in person before, despite the fact that this is a meeting for this division that is working underneath her. I don't know if they also invited other divisions to this party and that's the reason why that person hadn't seen her before, or if it really is just that hard to meet with Makima when she's so busy, but it does paint the picture that I've had before where Makima in this universe is literally either your angel or your devil. Either she's seducing and charming you, or she is controlling you with fear and superiority. And one of the most interesting aspects about Makima this episode is that she knows something about Denji that we do not. Now, last episode I commented about how this Eternity Devil seemed to be specifically interested in Denji for whatever reason, and I wondered if that was related to some overarching scheme, but ultimately just wrote it off like the other characters did in universe because it seemed like it was just the Eternity Devil's way of expressing fear of Denji's power. And while that may still be partially the case, we now know this episode that all of that was part of something deeper. This Eternity Devil knew the Chainsaw Devil in the past, and Denji's presence in general seems to be causing the rise of more devils, and more devils specifically who have eaten flesh from the Gun Devil. What makes this also interesting is, one, clearly there's something about the Chainsaw Devil that is special and shrouded in mystery that we will get into later. I don't know if this is referring to Pochita, or if there was something before Pochita. You would assume that this is about Pochita, and you would assume, I want to see this because you would assume Pochita used to be just this insane beast of a devil before it turned into that chibi form. But two, what I'm more interested in here is how Makima knows about the Chainsaw Devil, where she's aware that Denji is the key to finding and killing the Gun Devil. Definitely a lot of intrigue and cool mystery and setup there for the future. I'm really looking forward to getting into that. And honestly, that kind of applies to this episode as a whole. It really did overall feel like a transition and setup episode than anything else. It was very rich in vibes. It had a lot of interesting setup that don't necessarily have payoffs right now. We now know that there's another fiend working in this division that apparently is a lot more scary than Power is. We get a look at Himeno's master or teacher, and unfortunately we also get more foreshadowing and death flags on Aki and Himeno with their whole talk about how rational devil hunters don't last long in this field. But on that note, we also just really doubled down on this idea that devil hunting in general, especially in this public safety bureau, is essentially just lining up to die. You only do this job when you actually have some kind of personal stake in it, or if you're like Kobeni and just have nowhere else to go. And it really sunk in this episode how somber and depressing and lonely everyone in this group must be, despite all of the lively partying, and that was a really nice contrast. It also just really made me start feeling for characters like Arai or Kobeni just because they're still new and clearly they're hesitant about continuing in this line of work. I really, by the way, I really just want to give a shout out to Arai. There's a very quick little scene with him in the bathroom with Denji, just comforting and helping him puke it all out after that traumatizing experience. And even though it's just this quick little scene, the way that he talks about his mother in this scene and his own personal experience, it really left an impact on me and made me appreciate his character a lot more. But what more can I really say? It was a good episode, definitely not my favorite, definitely more so felt like a bridge episode into more important things, but by the end we're still getting into some really good writing and some really good character progression for Denji. So as far as this episode goes, mission accomplished. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to next week and seeing how that all plays out. Let me know in the comments or in the Discord server linked below the like button what you guys thought about this week's episode of Chainsaw Man. And why not? On top of that, tell me some of your first kiss experiences as well, and let me know if you think that they were as traumatizing and horrible as what Denji went through this episode. Like always, thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I will see you in the next video.